Hello, it's Dr. Gina Zietlow, Superintendent of the ABC Unified School District. I want to thank you for taking time to listen to our new podcast entitled The Brainstorm. This podcast is a way for us to showcase new ideas in education, highlight the people and initiatives that are at the core of our mission, and brainstorm together how to continue to educate and care for each and every student. Our communications officer, Mr. Scott Smith, will host this new podcast, and I'm sure to drop in as well. Mr. Smith brings with him not only a deep knowledge of the ABC Unified School District, but a curiosity for understanding what drives successful ideas and effective educators and staff members. I'm looking forward to hearing the conversations we have planned for you. I hope you'll subscribe to this podcast and send us your thoughts on what you hear. You are welcome to email us any comments or ideas for the show. Please email the Brainstorm at abcusd.us. Thank you again for your time and interest.
Hi, this is Scott Smith, Communications Officer for the ABC Unified School District and your host of The Brainstorm. Today, we have Mike Lawrence, our Director of Information and Technology here at the ABC Unified School District. Mike's an interesting guy. He's been an entertainer, he's been an English teacher, he's been tech coordinator at a county office of education, he's been an executive director and CEO of an education technology nonprofit. He spent some time consulting and marketing and doing sales stuff too. But today, we're going to talk about innovation, technology, and how it impacts our students in the classroom. We're very lucky to have him today. We hope you enjoy it. All right, Mr. Lawrence, it's good to have you here today.
I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. Well, we'd like to get a little bit of your background, but I want to know, why technology? Why innovation? Why are you here?
So, as far as technology, as odd as it may seem, it all started with Legos. The little plastic bricks. And I know they're not technology in a traditional sense, but for me, as a kid, we don't get to control what we're doing in a given day or where we're going. We just follow our parents around. But Legos, I could control. I could decide if I wanted to build a ship, if I wanted to build a castle, if I wanted to build, a faraway spacescape. That was all up to me and my seemingly unlimited pile of Legos that I would, place across the floor for my parents' feet. And those Legos captured a spirit of like, oh, okay, I have control. I can be creative. And it was later when I got, the Atari 2600 and I got my first Apple IIe that I felt that same feeling again. This is a space I can control. This is a space I can build anything. Like there's unlimited potential here. I figured out how to connect my Apple IIe to my television and I had color all of a sudden. And it was like the 50s again. I was the first kid on my block. It's like, come on over. I connected my computer and I got color. And so it was a discovery for me and an enjoyment for me that I found just hugely valuable. And so I just never looked back. Every time there was something new to try out, I'd go try it out. And technology just became something I would always incorporate into whatever I was doing.
Well, you're talking about technology, but I hear a lot about creativity in there too.
Well, for me, it's hard to separate the two because, in any of those endeavors, each of those steps along the way, and I was able to leverage the technology to explore creative opportunities. So I was a player of Dungeons and Dragons, and so you can build whole worlds there. And the technology there was more, paper pencil, but then soon enough there was technology and software to help with Dungeons and Dragons. And so, for me, it is a creative outlet. It is a place where creativity is amplified and enhanced by the technology. And students know this, and we were able to have them create movies, and they're able to create amazing drawings and podcasts and songs. All of that is made easier by the capabilities of the computer.
That's a good point. That is a good point. We often think of technology as, zeros and ones and very math-based, but you have to be creative to understand that language.
Yeah. Well, and it has a place in mathematics as well. I mean,
Sure.
You get stuck on a problem, what's going to get you to the solution? It's going to be that spark or that leap of creativity to go, oh, wait a second. What if I came at the problem from this way? So it's not creativity in the drawing and artistic sense, but it's that very essential creative leap that scientists and mathematicians and folks in sort of non-arts careers will tell you. It's a huge piece of how they get things done.
So as we're talking about creativity and technology, how do you see the two kind of, I know technology can help with the creative process, but how does it work in the inverse?
So I'll pull in a quote here, and it's the first name drop. So brace yourself.
If you're keeping score at home, this is
for
number
those
one.
Of you, this is the Steve Jobs quote, the requisite Steve Jobs quote. So Steve famously talked about a study that he read where creatures of various types exert a certain amount of effort to go to a certain distance, and you could think of a horse exerts a certain amount of effort to go a mile, and a human has to exert a lot more to get to that same mile. And they scoped out all these different creatures, and they found that the number one animal in this particular metric was the condor. It would exert the least amount of the effort to travel the furthest distance. Now, You could argue that's unfair because they're gliding, but if they start high enough up, they win that contest.
Okay.
And man is near the bottom of that in terms of the efficiency of effort to distance, until you put man on a bicycle. And when you put a man on a bicycle, it expands and enhances their efforts, amplifies their efforts. And all that to say, Steve said the computer is like a mental bicycle. It takes what you're bringing to the party and expands on it and amplifies on it and allows you to get a lot more accomplished with the same amount of physical effort than you would, going much further in that creative enterprise. And so I see creativity as sort of a natural extension of that. When you give someone that mental bicycle, which a lot of us carry them around in our pockets now, you can do so much more so quickly, and it unlocks that creative potential. You're able to think of things quickly that you wouldn't have otherwise just by doing a search or asking your AI assistant to give you some ideas, and then that just nudges you to take that creative leap, and it empowers you to give you a whole quadrillion responses that you could then parse down into the ones you're looking for.
What does innovation mean to you when you're thinking about educational technology and how we're using technology in the classroom now?
So the thing I think of is that teachers are natural innovators. I don't know if you know, but we don't have, as teachers, we don't get expense accounts. We don't get all the resources that we need.
Wait, really?
It's a shocker. It was a shocker to me when I showed up in my first classroom too. So we are naturally good at adapting and adjusting and where can I get an asset and where can I get this, and famously good about doing more with less. And so when I became a teacher and I was in the classroom and I looked around at the assets I had and the resources I had, and I was using everything I could. I used my background as a performer to sort of, read the room and figure out how am I going to engage these students. I just saw it as an audience, and my subject matter was the content I was delivering and engaging them with. And then I found technology as a natural asset that I could bring into the classroom. I didn't ask permission. I just brought the technology that I owned, or I found something that wasn't being used 2 doors down and asked politely afterwards if it was okay if I used it, because it's easier to beg apologies than permission sometimes. And so I think in education technology, educators are natural innovators. We take and find things from outside of education and apply them to the classroom, because we know that to reach that kid or to connect this concept to a student that hasn't encountered it before, you're going to potentially need to do that differently for each of those students. Each one's going to have a different key to unlock it. There's also just sort of a natural misconception around innovation that it always has to be the new thing, the new thing that's being sold online or that is being bought or invented. And while that is true, it could also mean using an old thing in a new way. Innovation has as its root, new is in there, of course, but it could be using old things in new ways. And I'll give you one example is, if you've ever heard of Postmodern Jukebox, it's this musical website that someone will take a known song from, let's say, the last 20 years, and they will redo that song in the style of 1960s, bebop, or they'll do it as a big band number. And it's the strangest sort of combination of ideas together. So PMJ is postmodern jukebox. And so one that I saw recently was, what if James Brown wrote Creep? And then, boom, they performed it. And I think that's innovative. Now, is that using technology? No. I mean, instruments and recording devices, yes, but not using technology in the sense that we're talking about it. But it's innovative, right? Who would have thought?
That's right.
Let's take this song from Radiohead and let's see what James Brown would have done with it if he'd written it. And I thought that was just delightful. And so I look at innovation in sort of a broader context, that it could be just taking a new approach at an old thing. One other example is Aristophanes is the Greek philosopher that was famously the head of the Alexandria Library. And in the 3rd century BC, this is the guy that figured out the circumference of the Earth. Mm-hmm. And 300 something BC.
Jeez.
And he did it with a stick and a well. Right? And he figured out that, it's 7 degrees shadow here in Alexandria, but 800 kilometers away, it's straight line. So he was able to do a math equation and figured it out. Well, that was, 3rd century BC. There's a friend of mine that was running the educational content for a PBS station, and he came up with an idea. Now that we have video conferencing and real-time distance learning, he did a live broadcast with students 800 kilometers away, in Fresno, as it happens, and at the certain time of day, they measured the shadow in Fresno, and they measured the shadow in Southern California, and then he said the contest was beat the Greeks. So it's this old concept, this mathematical equation. It's very old, but the innovation was, let's use video conferencing to get these students in Fresno live on camera with the students in the studio, and they were trying to compete to figure out which team was going to come up with the answer first. And it was this riveting television, especially for PBS. Sorry, PBS. And it was just fabulous to see kids use the technology to rediscover an old concept. And I call that innovation.
When you were in the classroom, what was the most exciting piece of technology that you either brought in or that was purchased for you? It wasn't the Apple IIe, was it?
I did bring that in, but that wasn't the most exciting. And you're definitely going to age me with this. But so this was back in the 20th century. Or it was, the 1900s.
The 1900s, yes. I've heard of them.
And so we had this brand new thing called the Internet and World Wide Web. And we all were getting on with our really loud modems that would make noise when they dialed up. But the classrooms weren't connected until one day I discovered that the teacher's lounge has a phone. And at Radio Shack, you could, at the time, for very few cents, get a little splitter. And so I got a splitter. I plugged it in the back of the phone that was largely unused in the teacher's lounge, and it was 2 doors down from my classroom. And I ran a wire into my classroom, plugged into the back of my computer, which was newer than an Apple IIe, and fired up AOL. And my classroom was the very first classroom at Costa Mesa High School online in would have been 96 or 97. Thanks to the little Radio Shack splitter. And that was pretty exciting, until we got the digital camera in, and then, each year there was like some new major innovation. But we were able to get on the internet in early days of the web in that classroom. And that would soon be the spark that got our class to build the very first website for Costa Mesa High School. And so we were the first high school in our district to get a website, all student built. And I knew just enough HTML to, wrangle this process and make sure that we had a live website that wasn't going to crash or let the kids say something inappropriate. But it was pretty exciting.
Fantastic. So we've come a long way since then. Technology moves very quickly. So how do you balance maintaining the existing infrastructure that we may have for our technology now with pushing forward, getting new programs, all about that innovation?
So I was thinking about this, and I think that humans, like machines, do have maximum capacities, and you have to make sure that it's a conversation, there's constant monitoring, and you can't push beyond that capacity until your team and your systems are ready. That said, you want to make sure that you're constantly guarding against just doing what we've always done around here for the sake of doing what we've always done around here. So the way protect against that is you go back to your purpose. Why are we doing this? Why are we, connecting to the web? Why are we having students talk to AI? Why are we? And if those answers change over time, then your systems and your programs and your infrastructure needs to change as well. Now, it's not a perfect world, and it's not going to happen in lockstep. There's funding, there's capacity to upgrade systems, but it's that conversation, it's that shifting that really should guide it. And I do have a thought, and I did teach English, so you'll forgive me if I want to bring a poem in.
Okay, here we go.
So, and a name drop. This is name drop number 2 for you scoring at home. So when Sir Ken Robinson came and spoke at the conference where I was a staff member, he quoted Anais Nin's poem, Risk. And it really captures an answer to your question here about when do you move forward, when do you stay put. And so her poem, and hopefully I'll get this right, is Risk. And the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom. And so it's that key moment, that spot between the tight bud and our capacity to manage and make that leap to the blossoming that we have to work through and make sure that as a collaborative team, you're checking against your original purpose. But I just loved that quote and how he brought it into the conversation.
One of the biggest areas of innovation right now in technology, of course, is artificial intelligence. And we've come a long way with technology in the classroom and how that's impacted the learning experience. How do you see AI impacting the learning experience?
So for me, AI is just the latest in the next transformative experience for education. We've had several. It was the web that I mentioned, and mobile learning was another one where everyone could publish. That's the Web 3 or social media.
Okay.
And then AI, I think, is the most recent, and it is in many ways larger than the previous 3 because it's hitting every industry. It's hitting every potential area that I was describing earlier where the mental bicycle could really apply. And so it's giving access in a way that, the only other innovation that I think is similar, World Wide Web launch, it's giving access to students who wouldn't otherwise have it. And so it could be a fantastic tool for equity if used and deployed appropriately. So I think that's one aspect of it. It could give you the ability to respond quickly and go further than you would have on your own. It's AI is that personal assistant that will nudge you and go, have you thought about this? Or could you maybe add a couple more things in there? It's, as an English teacher, one of my first responses that I had to AI, at least generative AI, was the idea that one of the hardest challenges we have as English teachers in particular is to get students to rewrite their own work. To get a second draft is glorious. I would celebrate when it happened. Because kids often, and I'm sure I was guilty of this as a student, like you finish the paper, you're done. That is it. There is no 8 steps to rewriting, even though my teacher says there is. And so getting them to read their own work again and go, oh, wait, I could say that better. Oh, wait, I said that twice. Oh, wait, I forgot to mention this character or this plot point. Because they'll see it. I mean, it's just a process of getting them to read it again. I feel like AI can short circuit that because if you say, hey, AI, give me some points that might be helpful for me to respond to this prompt, and then the kid writes the essay, and then they take it back to AI and they say, hey, here's my draft. Is there something I'm missing? Is there some ways that you would suggest improving it? And then look at that and have it be a conversation. You'll notice I'm not saying copy, paste, submit. It's a conversation. And I've done this with my own writing, and I'd like to think of myself as a pretty good writer. But darn it, if AI hasn't come back with some good suggestions, like, hey, you're using this phrase cut a lot, why don't you try this phrase? Or, and then there's times where it gives me a suggested thing, and I go, that is not how I would speak at all. And I rewrite it. But the concept is good. Let me rewrite it in my voice. So it's that back and forth exchange that's just super powerful and gives us a huge potential. And that's the English teacher response, and there's obviously lots of other curricular areas, and I think that you could unlock a lot of different potential using this essentially personal tutor that has access to all the world's information, and you're able to still be there as the human to provide the necessary evaluation of that data as it comes back to see if that's what I want to use, or no, I don't think that's accurate, because AI is not infallible, as we know.
That's true. And I know there's been some pushback by some educators, some parents about the use of AI in the classroom, or how that may impact critical thinking.
Yeah.
How would you respond to them?
So I think it's valid. I think it's important to have those conversations and talk through what are your concerns. What are the issues that most frighten you or most concern you? And I think that there are valid considerations that we need policy to help guide us on. So one quick thing I'll say is about cheating. Cheating usually comes up pretty quick in the conversation.
Almost every time.
Every time. And a point was made by Richard Kulata, who's the CEO of ISTE. And you can count that as a name drop. He's pretty amazing.
That's three.
So he was interviewed, and he said that a recent study came out from Stanford University, and they conducted a study on cheating before the pandemic and before generative AI. And students self-reported about 72% said, yeah, I've cheated. I cheat regularly. I'm not happy about it. But it was anonymous, and the kids were, we believe, fairly honest in their responses. Okay. 72%. That's a high number. So that is a problem. But that was before generative AI. And we had that problem then.
Wow.
Then they conducted the survey after the launch of OpenAI and ChatGPT and a lot of these other large language models. And you know what the number was? 72%. 72%. Same number of kids said, yeah, I cheat or I cheat fairly often. And we saw no real change after the advent of ChatGPT and AI. So technology didn't cause this problem. And it is a problem. Cheating is a problem. We have ways that we could work as a community and as a society to work and correct against that. But is technology the cause of that problem? No. Is it the accelerator or the way that we should solve it with AI detectors? Probably not, because it existed at the same quantity before and the same quantity after. Mm-hmm. So it was, I think, a valid point that he made with the study, and one that I like to bring in. The second one that I would bring in is, shouldn't we protect our students from it? It's this unknown entity. We don't quite know what it's going to say. We don't quite know what sources it was pulling from. And I think there's certainly levels of concern that we absolutely can act on and protect students from. But I think banning it entirely is not the proper course of action. We've seen it with almost every technological innovation is at some point banned, right? Calculators were initially banned. Ballpoint pens were initially banned. And then soon enough, you fast forward, now it's required. I had to just get my daughter a calculator for her class, and ballpoint pens are sort of expected. So if we give it enough time, even if, let's say, we did somehow ban AI and found a way to do that, we would soon enough realize, oh, we should probably start incorporating it. And so I look at it as we would be doing a disservice to the students if we did not introduce them to an imperfect new tool, as imperfect as it may be. Let's show you what it's capable of. Let's show you how to form a question, a prompt, and get better at that, because you will inevitably be entering into a workforce and a world in which AI is ubiquitous. And here's the second part of that. The AI that we know of today, that you and I are interacting with occasionally, is the least sophisticated, least powerful, least ubiquitous AI that our students will see in their lifetimes. When they graduate and they get into the workforce and they're our age, think of the AI then.
Right. And
if you need a comparison, think about the phones that we were using as high schoolers and the phones that we use now. And that's hardware. So that has some limitations on how fast that can progress. This is software, and we're on the cusp of quantum computing rolling out. Think about just how quickly AI is going to advance. So it's in our interest to train these students up, because at the end of the day, they're going to be the ones taking care of us when we're even older.
Well, and we need them to.
Yes, we do.
We need them to. So, I mean, that's some visioning right there. So what do you see, or what do you think will be the biggest impact, the technological impact in the classroom in the next, 5-10 years?
So I kind of hinted at it a moment ago. I think quantum computing we're right on the cusp of it, and it's in very limited circles right now. I think once that operationalizes...
Maybe you can explain quantum computing.
Maybe I can. No, okay. Here's my weak English teacher explanation of quantum computing. So computing, you mentioned earlier, is zeros and ones. Quantum computing isn't limited to just zeros and ones. And so when you have that huge shift in capacity to store data and calculate data, you're looking at a logarithmic leap in terms of computing power. I hope the computer scientists listening will not fault me for that answer, but it is, as I understand it, the functional shift from ones and zeros to a vastly larger data storage capacity.
Helpful. Thank you.
I try. Hey, if the Prime Minister of Canada could answer what quantum computing is, I can at least give it a shot.
That was pretty good.
So quantum computing would be one that I think has the potential. Maybe not within 5 years, and I'm remembering now you said 5 years. Obviously, generative AI, we've done that one. And at ABC here, we've really leaned into generative AI as a powerful tool when coupled with human intelligence, HI. And I owe it a huge debt, ABC owes a huge debt to Mr. Chad Lanes, longtime teacher here, and he's a program specialist. He helped craft that vision. And he talks about how teaching is always a human endeavor first. And coupled with generative AI, we've got amazing potential. So I think generative AI makes that list as well. You said impact, so I can't just go with the positives. So I will go with one negative. Cybersecurity, cyber attacks are only going to get better in a world with AI, and we've already started to see that happening. It used to be one of the ways you could identify a phishing email is that it has bad spelling or bad grammar.
Right.
And you're like, oh, this can't be from Bank of America. They would have caught that error. Well, those are going to disappear. All those bad phishing emails with spelling mistakes, they're going to be gone because AI will go through and clean up. Even if they aren't a native speaker or they don't even speak English at all, they could have AI write it in a way that you and I would read as correct to this language. So I think the bad guys coming at us with cyber attacks and cybersecurity and defending against that, I think that's a huge impact. It already is, and I think it will continue in the next 5 years.
What do you see the challenges going forward to keep up with technology, to do the best we can for our kids in the classroom?
So I think it comes down to capacity. I mean, how much can we as humans adapt to change? The thing about change is that we almost always have an emotional reaction to it. It's usually fear, it's anger, it's distrust, it's the can't I just be left alone and do this the way I know it works? And so those are natural human responses. I don't fault people for having those responses. But if you can get to the core of what they're afraid of and link it to a hope. There's an activity that Alan November, name drop.
Okay.
Alan November used to do called Best Hopes, Worst Fears. And when you're encountering change, when you're frustrated with yet another new thing that's coming our way, to get to your point, he would walk people through, mostly educators, through an exercise where you would on one side list all your fears, like what could go wrong. And we could do this with AI, we could do this with Google search, we could do this with one-to-one computing, any sort of innovation or change or challenge. And then he goes into your best hopes. So what could go wrong and what could really work well if this goes the best possible route. And I've done this exercise myself because like every great artist I steal, and so I do give credit to Alan November, so it's not a true steal. But what happens is you start writing these down and you start seeing connections. Okay. So instead of fear over here that links to a hope over here. And it doesn't happen, like you don't make it happen. As a facilitator, I'm not making it happen. I just stand back, I look at the list and they see it too. They go, well, that kind of, and so it buoys you from staying stuck in either column. You're not terribly concerned or afraid of those fears because you see that on the other side there's a potential positive outcome from it. So I think capacity, I think the ability to get beyond our emotional reaction to change and see the potential. And then the other piece of it, I would say, is to reconnect people to their passions. And people in this case can be the students, of course, but the educators, the teachers themselves. We got into this career not for the fame, the money, and the glory that comes with being an educator, all of those things. We got into it because we wanted to change the world for the better. We wanted to make the next generation have an even better opportunity to succeed. And so if you find a teacher that's frustrated or you're trying to introduce change and they're resisting, you can connect with the emotional and validate it. And then you can connect them with their passion. Why did you get into this to begin with? And can we connect this new thing that's coming with that passion? And there is usually a way to do it. That's your path forward. And sometimes, and this has happened in some of my conversations here even, when you're confronted with that barrier, and you can't figure out a way to move forward. It's just too much. I can't handle anymore. If you connect a kid with the innovation, if you find a student that is particularly excited about this thing, like I want to be on the esports team, or I want to go do this thing and work with AI, inevitably that excitement of that student will trigger something in the educator, whether they are classified, administration, teacher, it doesn't matter. We got into this for a reason. And when you see that kid light up because they see something they never thought they could do before, they just discovered that they love learning this thing, and this technology or this tool or this innovation is going to unlock it for them, that'll warm up the teacher, the administrator, the classified person, and go, oh yeah, let's figure out a way, at least for that kid.
Right.
And then it goes from there to more kids and to the class and the whole school. And so that's the path forward. Maybe it's overly optimistic, but that's what I see as sort of the way to address those challenges that come at us.
Before we wrap things up here, I know you're a big Ted Lasso fan.
Yes.
Can you give me your favorite Lassoism?
Oh, see, you didn't even prepare me for this one. My favorite Lassoism. I mean, we all love the dartboard scene.
Right.
And the natural go-to quote is the one that they falsely attribute to Walt Whitman of, be curious, not judgmental.
Mm-hmm.
So I give credit to the writers of the show. That's probably my best Ted Lassoism. There's so many, though, to go through. I mean, there's a great quote in the third season where he talks about, he says, I hope that all of us or none of us are judged by our worst moments in the way we respond to the world. And I'm not doing the quote justice, but he talks about giving people a second chance. And I think that probably, if I had it in front of me, I would probably go with that quote, even over curiosity, not judgmental, just because it's less heard. It's third season,
True. Yeah.
But it's so powerful about forgiveness. It's so powerful about understanding that we don't know what other people are going through.
No.
And so when you have a bad moment, or when someone has a bad moment near you or maybe directed at you, to respond with grace in that moment, to respond with curiosity, to respond with empathy. Look, that may not be directed. That may not be about me.
Right.
That may be directed at me, but it may not have anything to do with me, and they're just having a tough day. And that's essentially what he's getting at in this quote, that I hope all of us are judged by it or none of us, because it's really not representative of who I want to be seen as, as Ted Lasso would say, or Coach Beard would say. But yes, we could start the next hour of this podcast if you want to just dive into Ted Lasso.
Or even just create our own diamond dogs here. But in any case,
I'm not going to bark.
See, thank you very much, Mike, for being our first guest, for having some fun, and for giving us a lot of information. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
All right. Thank you.
The Brainstorm is produced by the ABC Communications Department. All content is copyrighted by the ABC Unified School District. All rights reserved.